She stood frozen in the doorway of the expensive restaurant, her second-hand dress suddenly feeling like a costume. Across the room, the man she'd been hired to meet, her blind date, was none other than Alexander Reed, Billionaire CEO and her new employer. Worse still, he was the boy who'd promised to return for her 15 years ago, before life tore them apart. Now she was just his children's nanny, and he didn't even recognize her. If you've ever believed fate has a twisted sense of humor, stick around to see how this shocking reunion unfolds. Like this video now and subscribe to our channel for more heart-wrenching stories that prove sometimes life's greatest plot twists lead to our happiest endings. Alexander Reed checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The blind date his sister had insisted on setting up was now officially late. He shouldn't have agreed to this in the first place. Running a tech empire while raising 2 children alone left no room for romance. But Olivia had been relentless, claiming he needed someone to make him human again after Caroline's death 3 years ago. The restaurant his sister had chosen was unnecessarily extravagant, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. Alexander loosened his tie slightly, uncomfortable despite having negotiated billion-dollar deals in rooms far more intimidating than this. Something about dating again made him feel like an awkward teenager rather than one of Seattle's most powerful businessmen. His phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Winters, the elderly nanny who'd been with them since Caroline died. "Emma's fever is back. Don't worry, I've got this. Enjoy your evening." Alexander sighed, guilt immediately washing over him. He should be home with his daughter, not waiting for some stranger his sister thought would magically fix his life. Just as he was about to text his apologies and leave, movement at the entrance caught his eye. A woman stood hesitantly in the doorway, her chestnut hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. There was something hauntingly familiar about her, though Alexander couldn't place it. When her eyes met his across the room, the strangest sensation washed over him, like remembering a dream he didn't know he'd forgotten. Eliza Bennett clutched her small purse tighter, fighting the urge to run. When her roommate had set her up on this blind date, she'd never imagined it would be with Alexander Reed, her new employer, and the boy who'd once been her entire world. She'd only started as his children's nanny 2 weeks ago, and he clearly hadn't recognized her from their shared childhood in the small coastal town of Millhaven. How could he? She'd been Lizzie back then, a gangly girl with braces and wild curls who lived in the cottage next to his grandparents' summer home. They'd spent 3 magical summers together, building sand castles and making promises under starlit skies, until the summer he didn't return. The summer everything changed. Now here she was, 28 years old, working as his nanny because her teaching position had been eliminated in budget cuts, and somehow accidentally set up on a date with him. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. "Miss Bennett?" Alexander's deep voice broke through her panic as he approached. "You're my sister's friend, the blind date?" Eliza swallowed hard. He truly didn't recognize her. "Mr. Reed, I think there's been a mistake." His brow furrowed in confusion. "You're not Eliza?" "I am, but I'm also your children's new nanny. I just started 2 weeks ago. I had no idea you were the Alexander my roommate Kate was setting me up with." Recognition dawned on his face, followed quickly by embarrassment. "Miss Bennett. Of course. I'm sorry I've been so busy I haven't been home much since you started." I didn't make the connection. What he didn't say was that he deliberately avoided home since hiring her, delegating the interviews and onboarding to his household manager. Something about the new nanny's application had stirred uncomfortable memories he'd rather keep buried. "This is completely inappropriate," Eliza said, already backing toward the door. "I should go." "Wait," Alexander said, surprising himself. "We're both already here. We might as well have dinner as colleagues." He gestured to the table. "Unless you'd prefer to leave?" Eliza hesitated. The sensible thing would be to walk away, but a part of her, the part that had never stopped wondering what happened to the boy with the crooked smile who'd promised to come back for her, wanted to stay. "Just dinner," she agreed cautiously. As colleagues, as the waiter seated them, neither could have imagined how this accidental meeting would unravel secrets both had kept buried for 15 years. or how the children already adored their new nanny for reasons Alexander couldn't possibly understand. Yet. The conversation started awkwardly, with Alexander asking formal questions about her qualifications and experience with children. Eliza answered professionally, keeping her responses brief and impersonal. Neither mentioned the strange familiarity that hung between them. Emma mentioned you taught her to make paper boats today, Alexander said, after they'd ordered. She said you told her they could carry wishes downstream. Eliza's heart skipped. That had been their thing, hers and young Alex's, sending wish boats down the creek behind his grandparents' house. It's a good activity for fine motor skills, she said carefully. She hasn't been that excited about anything since her mother died, he admitted, his guard dropping slightly. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Your children are wonderful, Eliza said sincerely. Emma is so creative, and James has such a kind heart. They miss you, though. Alexander's expression tightened. I'm doing my best. I didn't mean, Eliza began, but was interrupted by the arrival of their appetizers. As they ate, the conversation gradually shifted to safer topics, books they'd read recently, movies they'd enjoyed. Eliza was surprised to discover that the powerful CEO still loved science fiction novels, just as he had as a boy. Alexander found himself laughing at her dry wit, something he hadn't done genuinely in years. You remind me of someone, he said suddenly, studying her face. Someone I knew a long time ago. Eliza's heart pounded. Do I? Before he could answer, his phone rang. The screen showed Mrs. Winters calling. Excuse me, I need to take this, he said, already standing. It's about Emma. Eliza nodded, watching as he stepped away from the table, his face tense as he listened to the caller. When he returned, his expression was grim. Emma's fever has spiked to 103. I need to go home. Of course, Eliza said, already gathering her things. I'll come with you. Alexander looked surprised. It's your night off. She's my responsibility too, Eliza said firmly. And I've dealt with childhood fevers before. Something in her tone, the genuine concern, made Alexander nod gratefully. Thank you. The ride to his Mercer Island mansion was tense, both lost in their own thoughts. Alexander kept glancing at her profile, that nagging sense of familiarity growing stronger. There was something about the way she bit her lower lip when worried that tugged at his memory. When they arrived, Mrs. Winters met them at the door, relief evident on her lined face. She's asking for you, Mr. Reed, and for Miss Bennet too, strangely enough. Alexander frowned. She knows you're here? I texted her earlier today about our paper boats, Eliza explained. She might have seen it when Mrs. Winters checked her tablet. They hurried upstairs to Emma's princess-themed bedroom, where the 7-year-old lay flushed and miserable among her pillows. Her face brightened slightly when she saw them both. Daddy! And Eliza! Did you have a nice date? Alexander and Eliza exchanged startled glances. How did you... Aunt Olivia? Told me, Emma said, her voice hoarse. She said she was setting Daddy up with her friend Kate's roommate Eliza. That's you! She looked pleased with herself despite her illness. You little matchmaker, Alexander said, sitting on the edge of her bed and feeling her forehead. Were you in on this too? Emma's guilty smile was answer enough. I heard Aunt Olivia talking to Kate on the phone. I told her Eliza was our new nanny and she said it was perfect and meant to be. Eliza felt her cheeks burning as she busied herself checking Emma's temperature with the digital thermometer. 102.8, she reported. Down a little but still high. When did she last have medicine? About 3 hours ago, Mrs. Winters said. Let's get you some more, sweetheart, Eliza said, already moving to the connected bathroom where she knew the children's medications were kept. As she measured out the correct dose, she could hear Alexander talking softly to Emma, his deep voice gentle in a way she never heard at work. It reminded her of how he used to talk to injured seagulls they found on the beach, tender and reassuring. When she returned, Emma was telling her father about the paper boats. Eliza says wishes need patience to come true. Is that why your wish took so long, Daddy? Alexander looked confused. What wish, Princess? The one about finding Lizzie again. The medicine cup nearly slipped from Eliza's suddenly numb fingers. Alexander's head snapped up, his eyes locking with hers in shock. What did you say? He whispered. You told me about Lizzie. Emma said, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. The girl from the beach who was your best friend. You said you wished you could find her again someday. Alexander stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. Lizzie? He said, his voice barely audible. Elizabeth Bennet. Lizzie B. Eliza couldn't speak, couldn't move as 15 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled around her. She'd convinced herself. He wouldn't remember that the 3 summers they'd spent together had meant nothing to him compared to what they'd meant to her. It's you, he breathed. How did I not see it? I grew up, she managed to say, and you weren't looking for me anymore. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable, and Alexander flinched as if she'd struck him. Lizzie, medicine first, Eliza interrupted, turning to Emma, who was watching them with wide, confused eyes. Open up, sweetheart. Emma obediently took her medicine, but her gaze darted between them. Are you Daddy's Lizzie? The one from his stories? Eliza smoothed Emma's hair back from her forehead. We knew each other a long time ago, when we were kids. That's so cool, Emma exclaimed, then winced as the effort hurt her throat. It's like a fairy tale. Rest now, Alexander said gently. We can talk more when you're feeling better. Emma's eyes were already drooping. Will you both stay until I fall asleep? They sat on either side of her bed, neither speaking as Emma drifted off. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words and ancient promises. When her breathing deepened into sleep, Alexander nodded toward the door. We should talk, he said quietly. Eliza followed him downstairs to his home office, a warm space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a view of Lake Washington. He closed the door behind them, then turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you tell me who you were? He asked. Why would I? Eliza countered. You clearly didn't recognize me, and it's been 15 years, Alexander. People change. Not that much, he said, studying her face intently. Now that I know, I can see you everywhere in there. Your eyes are exactly the same. Eliza looked away. It doesn't matter now, doesn't it? He took a step closer. You disappeared, Lizzie. I came back that 4th summer and you were gone. No forwarding address, no way to contact you. Eliza's head snapped up. What are you talking about? You never came back. I waited all summer. Your grandparents said your family wasn't coming anymore. Alexander's brow furrowed. That's not possible. I convinced my parents to let me go back alone that year when they wanted to vacation in Europe instead. I stayed with my grandparents for 3 weeks looking for you everywhere. They told me your family had moved suddenly, that your father had taken a job across the country. That's not... Eliza stopped, realization dawning. My father did get a job offer in California, but he turned it down. We never moved. Then why did my grandparents tell me you had? Eliza sank into one of the leather chairs, her mind racing. Your grandmother never approved of our friendship. She thought I wasn't appropriate company for you. That summer, before you were supposed to arrive, she told me you'd be attending some prestigious summer program instead, that your parents had decided it was time you focused on your future. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, his expression darkening. She lied to both of us. My grandfather must have gone along with it. But why would they do that? Because I told them I was in love with you, he said simply. The summer before, right before I left, I told them I was going to ask you to wait for me, that once I was 18 I'd come back for you properly. Eliza stared at him, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. You never told me that. I was going to tell you the next summer. I had it all planned out. His laugh was bitter. I was 15 and thought I had everything figured out. I was 14 and thought you'd forgotten all about me, Eliza whispered. I spent that whole summer walking the beach, waiting for you to show up. By the time school started, I'd convinced myself our friendship had meant nothing to you. Alexander crossed the room to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. It meant everything, Lizzie. When I couldn't find you, I was devastated. I tried to convince my parents to help me look for you, but they thought it was just a teenage crush that I'd get over. And did you get over it? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I told myself I did. I went to college, built my company, married Caroline. But there were moments, watching the sunset over water, finding a perfect shell on a beach, when I'd think of you and wonder. I looked for you once, Eliza admitted, When I was in college, I found an article about your first startup and recognized your picture, but by then you were engaged to Caroline and I thought, what was the point? I'm so sorry, Lizzie, Alexander said, his voice rough with emotion. If I'd known, we can't change the past, Eliza interrupted gently. We were children, and you built a beautiful life with Caroline. You have two amazing children, who adore you, he said. Now I understand why Emma connected with you so quickly. Somehow, she sensed who you were to me. Eliza carefully withdrew her hands from his. This is all very overwhelming, Alexander. And complicated. I work for you now. He stood, respecting her need for space. What do you want to do? I don't know, she admitted. I need time to process this. And you do too. Alexander nodded slowly. Take all the time you need. But Lizzie, I don't want to lose you again. The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. At least not until we figure this out. As she left his office that night, neither could have predicted how their rediscovered connection would heal wounds they didn't know they still carried, or how Emma's innocent matchmaking would eventually lead to the family they were always meant to be. Over the next few weeks, Alexander and Eliza carefully navigated their new awareness of each other. During the day, she remained professional, caring for Emma and 8-year-old James with the same dedication as before. But in the evenings, after the children were asleep, they would sometimes meet in the garden or his study, slowly rebuilding their connection through shared memories and new discoveries. Alexander learned that Eliza had become a teacher because of their summers exploring tide pools and collecting specimens. She discovered that he'd incorporated elements of their childhood adventures into bedtime stories for his children for years. They know so much about you already, he told her one evening as they walked along the property's private shoreline. All those stories about Daddy's friend Lizzie were my way of keeping you with me, I think. Is that why Emma wasn't surprised when she figured out who I was? Eliza asked. Alexander nodded. She's been asking me for years if I'd ever find you again. I think in her mind you were some mythical figure who might help heal our family. That's a lot of pressure, Elle.